The late afternoon sun sank behind the weathered barns of Lubbock County, Texas, turning the dust into gold as the annual rare horse auction reached its fever pitch. Sawyer Kincaid stood alone in the dirt pen, one hand trembling on the lead rope of his prized stallion, Sable Mirage. The horse shifted his weight, ears flicking, oblivious to the storm raging behind Sawyer's quiet eyes. All around them, ranchers and city men lifted numbered paddles, each bid driving a wedge deeper into Sawyer's chest. Up on the auction block, Rhett Maddox leaned against the fence rail, a smug grin hidden beneath the brim of his immaculate hat. He had wanted Sable Mirage for years, wanted the bloodline, the prestige, and the chance to watch Sawyer crumble under the weight of unpaid debts. Sawyer caught Rhett's eye for just a heartbeat, then turned back to his horse, pressing his forehead against the animal's warm neck to muffle the breaking inside him. Quill Wakefield, Sawyer's oldest friend, hovered near the gate. He could do nothing but watch as the numbers climbed higher than any horse in the county had fetched before. Cheyenne Hartwell, the local vet, stood behind Quill, arms crossed, her lips pressed tight. She knew how much Sawyer had sacrificed to raise Sable Mirage, knew secrets about the stallion's lineage that even Rhett didn't suspect. But her eyes could not stop the bidding war that had taken on a cruel life of its own. 45,000! The auctioneer shouted, voice cracking from excitement and disbelief. 46! Rhett raised his paddle one last time, his voice dripping with triumph as he shouted, 46,100! A hush fell as the final blow landed. Sawyer's knees nearly buckled, but he forced himself to stand tall, one last promise to his father echoing in his mind, "Never bow, boy. Not even to the storm." Somewhere near the fence, Dixie Monroe Abernathy clutched Laramie Corbin's arm, whispering something that made the sheriff's brow furrow. Both knew what this horse truly meant for Sawyer, and what secrets might now be in Rhett Maddox's hands. Sawyer felt their eyes on him, but kept his focus locked on Sable Mirage's steady breathing, as if that alone could anchor him while the world tipped sideways. As Rhett's hired men stepped forward to take Sable Mirage away, Sawyer's grip on the rope tightened until his knuckles turned white. He whispered a single word into the horse's ear, a promise no one else heard. In that moment, buried beneath the noise of clapping and congratulatory shouts, a darker truth flickered inside Sawyer's gut. What he had just sold was worth more than money, and Rhett Maddox would soon learn that some legacies can't be owned at any price. The auction grounds emptied slowly, leaving behind drifting dust and a hush that felt heavier than the thunderclouds forming on the horizon. Sawyer Kincaid leaned against the back of his battered truck, watching Rhett Maddox's men load Sable Mirage into a sleek black trailer. Each stomp of the stallion's hooves echoed in Sawyer's chest like a slow drumbeat of regret. Quill Wakefield stood beside him, arms folded tight across his chest, as if bracing for a blow neither of them could stop. Quill's voice cut through the silence. "You should have let me talk to Laramie. He'd have found a way to stall this mess, Sawyer." But Sawyer didn't look at him. His eyes stayed fixed on the stallion's swishing tail, the polished trailer door slamming shut with a metallic finality. Some things can't be stopped, he thought bitterly. Not debts, not drought, not the ghosts of a family ranch one mistake away from ruin. A few yards away, Cheyenne Hartwell stepped out from the shadows of the old feed barn. She'd stayed hidden during the final bidding, unwilling to see Sawyer break in front of strangers. Now, she moved closer, her boots crunching over loose gravel. "Sawyer, you don't have to let him take Sable tonight. There's still time to fight this." Her eyes pleaded with him, but he shook his head slowly, his jaw tight. "He paid fair and square, Cheyenne," Sawyer said, voice low and raw. "And I signed it all away. My father's name, my last chance to hold this land together. Rhett owns it now, and he'll flaunt that fact in every damn pasture from here to Abilene." Cheyenne wanted to reach for him, to pull him back from the edge of whatever darkness he was slipping toward, but she knew too well the Kincaid pride. Near the auction office, Dixie Monroe Abernathy argued in hushed tones with Sheriff Laramie Corbin. Dixie, wearing her Sunday hat despite the dust, wagged a finger in Laramie's face. You know there's more to that horse than a big price tag, Laramie. You've known since his sire's papers went missing. Are you really gonna stand there and let Rhett Maddox swagger off with half the truth?" Laramie rubbed the bridge of his nose, eyes flicking from Dixie to Sawyer and back again. As Rhett's trailer rumbled down the dirt road, disappearing into the lowering dusk, Sawyer pushed himself off the truck bed and whispered to Quill, "Get the old papers from my father's desk. Tonight." Quill's eyes widened, but he nodded. Cheyenne stepped closer, her breath catching as she realized Sawyer's resolve had turned. Somewhere deep inside, the storm he'd tried to outrun all his life was gathering force. And soon, Rhett Maddox would find out that buying a legend was far easier than keeping it. Night fell heavy and restless over Sawyer Kincaid's small ranch house. The old screen door creaked open as Quill Wakefield stepped inside, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool breeze that rattled loose shingles overhead. On the battered kitchen table lay a half-empty bottle of whiskey, 2 chipped coffee mugs, and a small metal lockbox dented by years of being shoved from one drawer to another. Sawyer sat hunched over it, his fingers trembling as they brushed over his father's faded initials carved into the lid. "Found it behind the old tack trunk," Quill said, lowering himself into the squeaky chair opposite Sawyer. "You sure about this? Once we dig in, there's no putting it back in the dark." Sawyer didn't answer right away. He ran his thumb along the edge of the box, feeling the weight of secrets older than Sable Mirage himself. For years, he'd pretended the stories were just that, old ranch hands spinning yarns to pass the bottle around the fire. But Rhett Maddox had forced his hand. Sawyer popped the lock, the rusty hinges squealing like an old barn door. Inside lay yellowed papers, brittle with age, and a single black-and-white photograph of a stallion that could have been Sable Mirage's twin, except this one stood beside Sawyer's father, eyes fierce under a sunset sky. Tucked beneath the photo, an envelope addressed in his father's firm handwriting, "For Sawyer, when the time comes." His throat tightened around the memory of a man too stubborn to say "I love you," yet who left behind a truth too heavy to carry alone. Quill watched in silence as Sawyer unfolded the paper inside the envelope. Lines of neat script told a story of secret breeding deals, a hidden bloodline crossing borders and generations, and a name that had been scrubbed from official records long ago, one that tied Sable Mirage to a championship lineage worth 10 times what Rhett had paid. Sawyer's head dropped into his hands, the edges of the paper crumpling under his clenched fists. Outside the screen door, Cheyenne Hartwell's knock startled them both. She stepped in without waiting for an answer, her eyes flicking from the lockbox to Sawyer's strained face. "I heard from Dixie. Rhett's bragging all over town about putting Sable up for stud. He wants to profit quick before anyone asks questions about the papers." She paused, her gaze sharp. "What did you find, Sawyer?" Sawyer lifted his head, eyes burning not with defeat this time, but with the first spark of defiance Quill had seen in months. "I found proof that horse should never have been mine to sell. And if Rhett wants to play king, he'd better be ready for the fight of his life." Cheyenne's pulse quickened as she realized what he meant. Out there in the quiet Texas night, the storm Sawyer had been holding back was finally ready to break. By dawn, Sawyer Kincaid's kitchen looked like a war room. Old breeding ledgers, registration forms, and dusty file folders covered every inch of the battered table. Cheyenne Hartwell moved between stacks of paper, scanning pages with eyes sharp from years of spotting hidden diseases in horses no one else could diagnose. Quill Wakefield leaned by the doorway, shotgun propped beside him, as if expecting Rhett Maddox to kick down the door any minute. Sawyer paced the creaking floorboards, boots thudding with restless purpose. "He's bluffing," Quill said, trying to sound confident. "Rhett's too greedy to dig deep enough to know he's sitting on a stolen bloodline. He'll try to breed Sable Mirage fast and flip the foals before anyone talks." Cheyenne shot him a look, her tone flat but laced with worry. "He won't bluff for long if someone tips the registry. And once he knows what this horse really is, he'll do anything to bury it, along with whoever threatens him." A soft knock startled them all. Dixie Monroe Abernathy slipped in, her Sunday hat askew, her breath short from the climb up the porch steps. She set a battered leather satchel on the table. "You boys think you're the only ones holding secrets?" she said, her voice half amusement, half scolding. From the bag, she pulled old ranch receipts, faded telegrams, and a single notarized letter naming Sable Mirage's true sire, a champion from Kentucky, owned by a family with enough influence to ruin Rhett overnight. Sawyer stared at Dixie, realization dawning under his stubble and weariness. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Dixie's eyes softened. "Your daddy made me swear," Sawyer said. "Some truths protect a man better when they're buried. But your father didn't know you'd sell your soul to keep this land. Now you got no choice but to fight dirty to buy it back." Cheyenne stepped closer to Sawyer, voice low but steady. "We take this to Laramie Corbin. He's the law. He can stop Rhett before he moves the horse out of state." Quill barked a laugh. "You trust Laramie? He's been half in Rhett's pocket for years. We need proof strong enough the sheriff can't ignore. And we need it now, before Rhett finds a way to disappear Sable Mirage." Sawyer's eyes settled on the photograph of his father with the stallion that started it all. His hand curled around it like a vow. No more secrets. No more running. He turned to Quill, voice firm. "You and Cheyenne get to Laramie. Dixie and I will stall Rhett. He thinks he's bought my past, but he's about to find out he can't afford my future." Outside, the first light of day crawled over the horizon, bright enough to show that this fight was only just beginning. The midday sun beat down on the dusty back roads of Lubbock County as Sawyer Kincaid and Dixie Monroe Abernathy bounced along in Sawyer's old truck. The cab smelled of dry sweat and old leather, but neither spoke of comfort. Their minds were miles ahead at Rhett Maddox's sprawling ranch. Sawyer's grip on the wheel whitened his knuckles, each mile eroding what little patience he had left. Dixie watched him from the passenger seat, her gloved hands folded neatly in her lap, though her pulse thrummed like a wild drum. "He'll smell this coming, Sawyer," Dixie warned softly. "Rhett always did have a nose for trouble. Why do you think he latched onto your family's legacy so quick?" Sawyer didn't look at her, eyes pinned to the winding road. "I don't care if he smells it or sees it. I'm not crawling to him like a beggar again. Not this time." Meanwhile, back in town, Cheyenne Hartwell and Quill Wakefield stormed into Sheriff Laramie Corbin's cramped office. The place reeked of stale coffee and unspoken favors, but today Cheyenne wasn't here for polite conversation. She slammed the stack of notarized documents onto Laramie's desk, making him flinch behind his badge. "You always claimed to stand for the law, Laramie. Well, here it is, proof Rhett Maddox bought stolen bloodlines. If you ignore this, you're wearing that star for nothing." Laramie tugged at his collar, sweat beading along his temples. Quill stepped forward, voice low but edged like a blade. "You can back him, or you can back the truth. One way or another, Sawyer's not letting that horse vanish into some hidden stud farm." For a heartbeat, the sheriff looked every bit the tired old man he'd become. Then he pushed up from his creaking chair and grabbed his hat. "Fine. But if we're doing this, we do it by the book. No vigilante stunts." On the outskirts of Rhett's ranch, Sawyer parked behind a line of oak trees, engine idling low. Dixie rested a hand on his arm. "He'll twist your words, Sawyer. He always does. Be ready to stand firm." Sawyer nodded once, jaw clenched. He stepped out into the scorching sun, dust kicking up under his boots as he approached the big white barn that held Sable Mirage, his father's legacy and his own redemption bound by one horse's heartbeat. Inside the barn, the smell of fresh hay and expensive feed hit him first. Beyond the stalls, Rhett Maddox stood, sleeves rolled up, talking to a hired hand about shipment papers. He turned when Sawyer's shadow fell across the doorway, his grin slow and mocking. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. Come to watch me breed your precious bloodline for real money, Sawyer." Sawyer didn't flinch. He stepped closer, voice low but steady. "No, Rhett. I came to take back what you stole, and this time you're not walking away untouched." Rhett Maddox let out a low, humorless laugh that echoed against the polished stall doors inside the immaculate barn. He flicked an invisible speck of dust from his cuff, eyes flicking over Sawyer Kincaid like he was sizing up a stray dog begging at his porch. "You got some nerve, walking in here making demands. This barn, this horse," he jabbed a finger at the stall where Sable Mirage nickered softly, "all mine, paid in full." Sawyer didn't flinch. He stepped so close he could smell the expensive cologne that couldn't mask the rot underneath Rhett's grin. "You bought lies, Rhett, and now you're about to choke on the truth. That horse's bloodline ties back to the McGregor stud farm in Kentucky. Any foal you sell from him makes you a fraud and a thief. Cheyenne and Quill are with Laramie Corbin right now. By sunset, every registry in Texas will know what you did." For the first time, Rhett's eyes twitched, a flicker of uncertainty slicing through the arrogance. But he recovered quickly, smirking as he leaned closer to Sawyer. "You think some paperwork and a washed-up sheriff scare me? By the time you finish crying to the courts, Sable Mirage will be halfway to Oklahoma under a new name. You're broke, Kincaid. Always have been, always will be." Sawyer's fists balled at his sides, but Dixie Monroe Abernathy's voice behind him held him steady. She'd slipped in unnoticed, her presence a reminder of generations who had fought to keep their honor when the law turned its back. "This ranch, this town. Folks remember who built them, Rhett. You think you can buy silence, but the people here owe the Kincaids more than they owe your dirty money." Rhett's gaze darted from Sawyer to Dixie, calculating, cold. His voice dropped to a hiss. "You two think you can turn the county against me? Fine. Try it. But you know how I play when I'm cornered." He jerked his head toward the stall. "If I can't profit from that horse, no one will. You want him back? Find him, if you can." Sawyer lunged forward, grabbing Rhett by the collar just as the sound of a truck engine roared outside the barn doors. Rhett's hired men were moving Sable Mirage now, probably into a hidden trailer bound for some backroad exit. Sawyer's pulse thundered in his ears as Dixie shouted behind him, "Sawyer! If they get that horse past the county line, we lose everything." Sawyer released Rhett with a shove, bolting for the stall door, heart pounding with one thought, "Not this time. Not my father's legacy. Not my blood." Sawyer Kincaid burst through the barn doors just in time to see dust clouds swirling behind a black livestock trailer barreling down the dirt road that cut through Rhett Maddox's back pasture. He didn't think, he just ran. His boots pounded the hard-packed ground, lungs burning, each stride fueled by memories of his father's rough hands lifting him into the saddle for the first time, of Sable Mirage as a newborn colt leaning against his knee for warmth. Behind him, Dixie Monroe Abernathy's shouts faded into the wind as she fumbled for her cell phone, dialing Cheyenne Hartwell and Sheriff Laramie Corbin with shaking hands. She knew there was no stopping Sawyer now. All she could do was buy him time and pray the sheriff would come through for once in his life. Inside her chest, fear tangled with a spark of pride. Sawyer was done being the man who bowed his head. Up the gravel road, Quill Wakefield's battered pickup skidded to a halt just in front of Sawyer. Quill flung the passenger door open, yelling over the roar of the engine, "Get in! You're not running down a truck with your boots, cowboy!" Sawyer dove inside, slamming the door as Quill jammed the gas pedal to the floor. The old truck fishtailed, rocks flying, chasing the trailer that carried more than just a horse. It carried Sawyer's last chance to put the Kincaid name back where it belonged. Inside the truck's cab, the smell of burned oil and sweat mixed with the urgency pulsing through Sawyer's veins. He gripped the dashboard as Quill took a turn so hard it threw them against the seat belts. "They'll head for the South Ranch gate," Sawyer barked. "It's old but wide enough for that trailer. If they hit the highway, we lose them for good." Quill nodded, eyes locked on the cloud of dust ahead like it was a flame he had to swallow whole. Back at the barn, Dixie's voice cracked as she pleaded with Laramie over the phone. "Sheriff, they're moving the horse now. Sawyer and Quill are on them, but they need backup. Rhett's men are armed and mean as snakes. Don't you dare stand behind that desk while Sawyer does your job." Laramie's tired voice came through in a low growl. "Stay where you are, Dixie. I'm rolling out now. Nobody crosses my county line with stolen stock. Nobody." Sawyer's heart hammered as Quill pushed the old truck to its limits, closing the gap on the fleeing trailer. Through the cracked windshield, Sawyer caught a glimpse of Sable Mirage's dark mane whipping through the slats. His pulse steadied for one clear moment. This was his fight, his father's debt, and Rhett Maddox's mistake. And before the sun set over Lubbock County, Sawyer Kincaid would take back what was his by blood and by promise. The roar of Quill Wakefield's truck rattled every loose bolt as it barreled down the narrow gravel road, eating up the distance between them and Rhett Maddox's stolen trailer. Sawyer Kincaid braced himself against the dash, eyes locked on the swinging metal gate at the end of the pasture fence line. If Rhett's men made it through that gate and onto the open highway, Sable Mirage would vanish into the maze of backroads and backroom deals that Rhett thrived in. "Floor it, Quill!" Sawyer barked, voice ragged. Quill just grunted, sweat dripping from his temple as he shifted gears and coaxed every ounce of speed from the battered old engine. The trailer ahead swerved dangerously, kicking up rocks and dust. Sawyer's heart slammed against his ribs when he saw a figure in the back, a hired hand with a rifle propped on the trailer's ledge, scanning for pursuers. Back at the barn, Cheyenne Hartwell skidded her vet truck to a stop beside Dixie Monroe Abernathy. The sheriff's cruiser lights flickered behind them, Laramie Corbin barking into his radio for backup. Cheyenne grabbed Dixie's arm. "They're gonna hit the south gate. We have to block the road or Rhett will have them over the county line in 10 minutes. Dixie's eyes narrowed, her voice steel. "Then let's block it." Meanwhile, Quill's truck rocketed over a rise, and Sawyer spotted the south gate ahead, half hanging from its hinges, battered from decades of ranch work. Rhett's trailer shot through the gate, tearing a chunk of wood clean off. But on the far side, a cloud of dust rose fast. Laramie's cruiser skidded sideways across the narrow lane, sirens wailing, blue lights flashing in the dying sun. Behind him, Cheyenne's vet truck fishtailed to block the only gap left. The trailer braked hard, tires screaming. One of Rhett's men leaned out, rifle aimed at the blockade. Sawyer cursed, throwing open the passenger door before Quill even stopped. He hit the ground running, boots sliding on loose gravel, eyes locked on Sable Mirage's wild, terrified eyes peeking through the trailer slats. This was no longer about money or bloodlines. It was about a promise Sawyer made to his father and to himself. Gunfire cracked, shattering the air. Laramie's voice boomed from behind his cruiser. "Drop it! Nobody fires another damn shot in my county." Rhett's men hesitated, seeing the sheriff's shotgun leveled square at them. In that heartbeat of uncertainty, Sawyer lunged for the trailer latch. Fingers trembling, he yanked it open just as Sable Mirage surged backward, nostrils flaring, eyes rolling white in panic and fury. Sawyer felt the horse's warm breath on his cheek as he threw himself around Sable Mirage's neck, whispering over and over, "Easy, boy. Easy. You're coming home." Behind him, the standoff hovered on a knife's edge. One wrong move from Rhett's men, and the fight would turn deadly under the big Texas sky. The air between the sheriff's cruiser and the trailer seemed to vibrate with the threat of violence. Sawyer Kincaid kept one arm draped firmly around Sable Mirage's trembling neck while his free hand fumbled with the halter rope. The stallion's muscles quivered under his grip, ready to bolt at the first gunshot. Behind him, Rhett Maddox's hired gun shifted uneasily, finger twitching near the trigger. One slip of temper, and blood would stain the dust. Quill Wakefield crouched behind the open door of his truck, eyes trained on Rhett, who had finally stepped from the cab of a black pickup idling behind the trailer. Rhett's smirk was gone, replaced by a snarl of pure rage. "Get away from that horse, Sawyer. You think some old registry papers and a washed-up sheriff can stop me?" This is my animal now. You signed him over." Sheriff Laramie Corbin raised his shotgun a fraction higher, voice a calm growl beneath the rising wind. "You stole that horse under false pretense, Rhett. And I've got 3 sworn affidavits that say so. Step back, call your men off, or so help me. This ends right here with cuffs or coffins. Your choice." For a heartbeat, silence reigned except for Sable Mirage's ragged snorts and the hum of locusts in the grass. Then Dixie Monroe Abernathy, standing bold beside Laramie's cruiser, lifted her chin and called out to Rhett in a voice that carried years of grit. "You made your living off threats and bribes, but not today, Rhett Maddox. This town remembers the Kincaids. You're done here. Try running. Try fighting. But you won't own us again." Rhett's glare flicked from Dixie to Sawyer, then back to the sheriff. His hand twitched at his belt buckle, as if he might draw a hidden piece, but the cold barrel of Laramie's shotgun said all that needed saying. With a curse spat into the dirt, Rhett hissed to his men, "Stand down. Back in the truck. Now." The rifle dropped to the gravel, the hired hands lowering their eyes like whipped dogs. Sawyer's breath shuddered out of him as the threat bled from the air. Sawyer pressed his forehead to Sable Mirage's mane, murmuring promises he should have spoken long ago. Behind him, Quill slapped a hand on his shoulder, voice hoarse. "You did it, brother. The whole damn county's watching. He can't hide this mess now." But even as the sheriff cuffed Rhett Maddox in the fading light, Sawyer's mind turned to the ranch waiting at home, still in debt, still one storm away from ruin. Yet with Sable Mirage beside him, maybe, just maybe, the Kincaids had a fighting chance to rebuild all they had nearly lost. 2 weeks later, the first honest rain in months fell over the Kincaid ranch. Fat droplets drummed on the tin roof of the old barn as Sawyer Kincaid leaned against the open stall door, watching Sable Mirage chew lazily at fresh hay. The stallion's coat shone again under the soft lantern light, the wounds of rough hands and rougher roads fading day by day under Sawyer's care. Outside, the fields drank greedily, thirsty earth blooming green once more. Behind him, Cheyenne Hartwell slipped inside, brushing damp hair from her eyes. She paused, smiling faintly at the sight of Sawyer's shoulders finally relaxed. "He's healing faster than I expected," she said, voice low so as not to spook the horse. Sawyer nodded, reaching out to stroke Sable's neck. "Maybe because he knows he's home," he murmured. It sounded strange to say it aloud, but true all the same. They were both healing, in more ways than one. By the barn doors, Quill Wakefield leaned with crossed arms, hat pushed back on his head, grinning like a man seeing a ghost turn flesh again. "Laramie says Rhett Maddox isn't talking. Plea deal's dead. He's looking at real time, Sawyer. You broke the king's crown right over his own head." Sawyer chuckled, a sound that surprised him. For the first time in years, laughter didn't feel like a sin. Outside in the muddy yard, Dixie Monroe Abernathy and Sheriff Laramie Corbin stood under the same umbrella, watching rain splash in the tire ruts left by Rhett's stolen trailer. Dixie squeezed Laramie's arm, her voice firm but gentle. "You did right, Sheriff. Folks around here needed to see the law stand taller than a man's wallet." Laramie only nodded, eyes locked on the barn where old ghosts were being laid to rest. Sawyer turned to Cheyenne, sudden quiet filling the space between them. "I almost let him go. Twice. If it hadn't been for you, for Quill, for Dixie, I'd have nothing left but another story about how the Kincaids lost everything." Cheyenne reached up, brushing a bit of straw from his shoulder. "Well, you didn't. And maybe now you can stop living for ghosts and start living for yourself. And for him." Her eyes flicked to Sable Mirage, who snorted as if he agreed. Outside, thunder rumbled but no one flinched. This storm brought life, not ruin. As Sawyer closed the stall door and stepped into the rain, Quill clapped him on the back. Dixie and Laramie tipped their hats. Cheyenne caught his hand, fingers warm despite the chill. For the first time in too long, Sawyer Kincaid felt the land beneath his boots solid, the future wide open as the Texas sky. Sable Mirage was safe, the Kincaids were whole, and the fight to rebuild had only just begun.